Yeah.
Confidential computing is going to take a bigger and bigger role in this. It's fascinating to see how this whole space is evolving. Damien and Bryce, maybe this is for you too, but what is it that makes Google unique versus some of these other cloud competitors? I mean, it seems like every one of the major companies out there has its own cloud play. So what makes Google's unique?
Should I take that?
Yeah, go ahead, Damien.
Yeah, sure, go for it.
All right, cool. So I would bucket it into three things. So one, innovation, two, product readiness, and three, privacy security. So from an innovation standpoint, I mean, obviously I'm a little bit biased on the AI side of things, right? I've been here at Google Cloud for coming up on 8 years, and so have really seen the trajectory on what we've done from an innovation standpoint on the AI side of things. A lot of people think that Google started as a software company. I think of it more as Google started off as a data company, right? And data is obviously one of the most pivotal aspects of AI. Obviously, research and development and like tons of compute, right? But that helped us set the stage to be an AI first company 10 years ago, right? And so I've been lucky to be here for about 8 years of that journey. And we were already a leader in the predictive AI space long before the generative AI trend. And then, obviously the attention was all you need white paper that kicked off the transformer models, right? And everything that we see in LLMs today. So it's been an incredible, an exciting journey. And it's just amazing to see in, the ways that we can help customers, help companies, particularly startups, develop their own AI solutions and products. So, that's one area, just the strong research and development we've been able to bring to the table in Google Cloud. Production readiness. So, I mean, it's one thing I think, folks in the call probably recognize that. It's one thing to develop a solution, develop a product, but putting into production is a whole other story, right? So, for us, our infrastructure that we've been building out for the past couple decades, where we have, provenance from the ground up, even just purpose-built servers or data centers, the way they're built, our global network that's able to send traffic around the globe faster than the internet. I mean, sometimes, even for those leveraging our AI capabilities, having that, super low latency network by itself is significant enough, right? Then, of course, our own purpose-built chips for AI, TPUs, tensor processing units. So, everything that's needed to not only from the Google side be able to support with several of our products, 2 billion plus users every day, right? But also, obviously, our customers that are able to leverage that same infrastructure capabilities to not just have something in development, but actually go to production to a global user base is no small feat. And then, from a privacy security standpoint, that's an area that is often an afterthought as you're going into production with stuff. And, Google Cloud, right, standing on the shoulders of Google essentially has been fighting bad actors for a couple decades, right? We've learned a thing or two about what it takes to keep systems from the ground up secure. And that's obviously incredibly important to our customers. And so, that's something that we emphasize a great deal when working with the companies we support.
Yeah, it's amazing how everyone just kind of expects something to work and they don't realize how much effort it takes just to make sure that no bad actors can kind of jump in and make it from a good experience to just a downright horrible experience that everyone's going to remember. Everything has to go right just to make sure that everyone has a good experience every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Bryce, maybe from like a Web3 perspective, how is Google unique to Google to some of the cloud competitors?
Yeah, I think one key thing is open cloud philosophy in the sense. To me, it closely aligns to the decentralized nature of Web3 in a sense. The commitment to having open standards, multi-cloud, allowing developers to build and run applications where it makes the most sense, avoiding vendor lock-in. Products like our Anthos products, this speaks to that. Building a whole product around that type of philosophy is key, and then goes back to the just developer-focused tool. So a comprehensive suite of services designed to improve like developer productivity, AI coming into that whole picture of like code assist. I think this is very useful for the Web3 space. A lot of people who are trying to get into the space, and probably a mention later on about like vibe coding in the sense where using natural languages to help them achieve certain levels of understanding of what they're doing in a sense without having to kind of start all over or learn a new language that breaks down barriers. And I think, like Damien said, we're a leader in AI in a sense, on the forefront of that, always trying to be on the cutting edge or innovation side of things. And then my biggest thing, even prior to being at Google, I always heard about when folks talked about analytics, Google came up, right? And there's a mass amount of data out there in the Web3 space that I feel like is truly untapped, whether it's coming from certain oracles, off-chain or on-chain. This could be heavily utilized, and I think Google can be that player to bridge the gap. So when we're talking about sophisticated analysis on on-chain data and doing it at scale, I think we're leaders in that space. And then providing a platform or spotlight for Web3 organizations to get the traffic and the attention that they want. It's becoming a saturated space with different protocols coming out ever so often. It's just it's hard to get the right partnerships and the right funding and investments. And I think Google's trying to lean in many ways of how we make unique partnerships through our Web3 portal. So that's just a few thoughts from my perspective.
Yeah, no, totally. It makes a lot of sense. There's so much information out there, that is either coming from on-chain or off-chain, and there's definitely a lot of potential for fusion on there, either from the Web3 side where users can delegate it, or from off-chain being able to provide it to users. There's definitely a lot of space there for new innovation, and it's a very interesting take. I think that's really an unspoken part of the area. And that actually kind of leads me into something that we really are kind of talking about here throughout this space. I guess, how does Google Gemini and how do Google Cloud, how do they work together in this Web3 space?
A lot of this is dependent upon the customers, right? And the developers, the audience, in many cases. Like, what are we wanting to see in this space? And then Google, I know from my perspective, as an advocate for the Web3 space, I'm wanting to play a role in saying how can Google bridge the gap or innovate or create a product that meets the need of our customers and their clients or the audience and developers in the Web3 space. I think the top thing that comes to mind is smart contract assistance, explaining, debugging, auditing, whatever language, Rust, Solidity, contract code. And I think this is huge for Zetachain, to the fact that you're a universal blockchain. Many individuals are coming from a perspective where, I don't want to lock into just one protocol, one layer one. Having some type of assistance in understanding a smart contract and how to deploy it properly across multiple chains, but even just on Zetachain itself, can be useful. And I think that's a tool that can be built through Vertex AI and utilizing Gemini as well. Accelerated dApp development. We're constantly trying to come up with different ways of how to deploy different types of smart contracts and dApps that are out there at a higher rate, but quality as well. So just having that as I guess AI assisted approach to building out front end components, back end logic, so that way people can just continue to build, and most of the other things that take a little bit longer to understand, like certain Web3 libraries, it's left up to maybe having a repository of something that has the AI grounded on information that you really probably could lean in on certain like data analysis, intelligence, building a knowledge base, having certain type of context, and you don't have to rehash it. And then I go back to something that Damien briefly mentioned is security as well. So something with vulnerability analysis, we always want to keep the space safe for many different people. There always will be bad actors. So how can Google play a good part in helping out in that Web3 space? And I think that over the last few months or years, we acquired great companies like Mandiant and Wiz that could probably lean in or have tooling that could help out in this space.
Yeah, the smart contract areas, especially having AI to be able to go over it, and as we learn more and more about best practices, and I think there's definitely a growing, I should say it's already pretty established, but being able to accumulate more and more well-completed smart contracts for AI to be able to train to identify what does a good smart contract look like versus one that has potential vulnerabilities into it. I think that that's going to help not just the entire space, but even developers moving forward to be able to understand what is best practice. How can I entrust when I'm having a Google agent, a Gemini agent helping me build this code? Is it actually trustworthy? Obviously, we're always going to want to have that eye, the human eye on it to make sure that everything is correct and they're doing to the best of their ability. But the more that Gemini can be able to help them, build it out in the first place, that's more time being able to be creative on what we actually want to develop and less time having to just be able to type the code. And we kind of mentioned a couple of times, as these AI agents are getting better, how they improve. Damien, how does Google Gemini, I guess it's just rolled out with 2.5. How is that better than any of these past versions of Google Gemini?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen a tremendous uptick in adoption with 2.5, right? 2.0 was a significant step up, but really 2.5 has been game changing. And I mean, what it really comes down to, I mean, there are a few areas, but one is quality, right? I mean, I think that's first and foremost for everybody. And that's not a trivial problem to solve. I mean, it's not even a trivial, question to ask because quality depends, right? So, on one hand, if we're just thinking of language models, then quality can be very subjective, right? I mean, for one, it has to pass the smell test, so to speak, right? Like the responses you get, are they helpful or not? Right. So that's inherently subjective. Google has, benchmarks that we adhere to, but also human feedback is incredibly important. It's a matter of identifying what's important to our customers, what's in, both from a consumer standpoint and from, the companies that are leveraging Gemini. But we also know that we can't just kind of adhere to, the whims of what kind of everyone wants to see in a model, because factuality is important, right? So, we can't cater too much to, what feels good. We owe, consumers of Gemini, companies that we support, grounded, factually accurate responses. When it comes to coding, it's pretty straightforward. Right, the code that is generated, does it work or not? Right, so that's relatively easy to address. Similar for other modalities, translation, for example. Does it make sense or not? Right, so those are some really that's really what it comes down to in terms of differentiators. Some of the other aspects, so obviously, factuality, does the code work, is critical, but being able to ground data, so, more so on the, text generation side, from an accuracy standpoint, from a real-time accuracy standpoint, that's obviously key. Is your data grounded in sources that you trust, right? And so for the companies that we support, can the responses accurately reflect the data that the company stands behind, right? And so sometimes that can be a needle in the haystack problem. From the companies that we support, sometimes there's tons of data that a model needs to be able to churn through before being able to identify that needle in the haystack. Sometimes there are multiple needles in the haystack that need to be accurately identified. But at the same time, when it comes to getting real-time updates and information, grounding in Google search, for example, that's something that is a strong advantage for us, even grounding in Google Maps, right? Sometimes that's particularly relevant. We're seeing now, thinking models, right, and deep thinking models. So models that can feed forward multiple times and really evaluate, hey, this is the response that I'm going to propose to this, consumer, customer, whatever. Is it accurate, right? And being able to reflect on real-time data sources to really ensure that the answers generated make sense. And then, I'll leave with tool calling. So not only being able to connect to the right tools in a secure way, but also knowing when to call which tools, being able to leverage the right tools at the right time. That's also what's being very much expected of high quality models, high quality agents. And so those are all areas where 2.5 is significantly more improved from past models. I'll also say this, I think we've all kind of heard this before. The model that you use today is going to be the worst model you ever use, right? I don't know who I'm paraphrasing that from, but it's true. Like, I'm very much looking forward to the next models that come out from Google DeepMind, not only from a coding standpoint, but video generation, image generation, all the modalities. I mean, the one thing that we're lucky with Gemini, the way that it was developed from way back when, was being multimodal from the ground up, right? And so maybe with our 1.0, that aspect wasn't being able to really be maximized, but it is being maximized now. Having a model being able to look over your shoulder, so to speak, like as you're coding, right? So, screen sharing, all that becomes critical in more aspects than we maybe would have initially thought. And so I'm really looking forward to the developments that are coming out of Google DeepMind in the near future.
That's very, very cool. I think someone had told me that the upgrade to 2.5 is basically a coining of 2.verify, right? It's still very similar answers, but it's the verification side that has really taken a step up.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So this leads me to I think something that most people are here for. Is most people know that are joining this chat, Zetachain is sponsoring a hackathon right now with Google Cloud on Dora Hacks. And I think we've seen a huge wave of people getting into using AI tooling for something called vibe coding. I think most people here know what vibe coding is, but I am not a developer. I've played around with AI agents. But what is vibe coding? And how does Gemini 2.5 help make this the new future of building cool things?
I can take a stab at it first. I know Damien probably have a much better answer than me. But, I think of it, I mean, you said developer, and for me, I think of it as for anyone, right? To express their intentions and goals for application in natural language. And then it basically will help translate functional code and components and then go deploy it. There's many ways to do it. You can do it through Gemini, like Gemini's actual web application, and do Canvas, or you can go into like Firebase Studio or have your own editor and have some type of API that's calling various different models, right? It's just collaborating with AI and having more of a conversational, and it's less rigid, less structural in a way. And you have an idea, you just turn an idea to a prototype in a sense, and it could be a game changer in many ways.
Yeah, for sure. Damien, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, and sorry, the question was, what is vibe coding?
How does Gemini 2.5 like help with vibe coding? And maybe you have a different idea of what vibe coding is.
Yeah.
And just how are people able to turn thoughts into actual built ideas, built projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, those in the call are just seeing firsthand how dramatically impactful this is on how you get software and services out there, right? Anything that's code based. Just a caveat, I am not currently a developer, right? So I haven't done it I haven't put anything in production in a while, but most of my career I have been, a developer engineer. So I kind of really wish I had these capabilities back then, but I do, code occasionally, and it just dramatically changed things. So, just a simple area, forget like IDE integration or command line integration, whatever. Even just being able to go to gemini.google.com or whichever, however you like to access Gemini, and just asking something like, hey, how do I, create something that'll help me debug my network connectivity at home, right? That might have been a recent challenge that I had. And just like being able to iterate just easily, you'll get a snippet back, and you run it in Python, and you hopefully won't get an error, but you might, right? And so just being able to take that error back and plop it back into Gemini, and I'm getting this, what I do, and just you get updated code. And just being able to quickly iterate like that in natural language, it's pretty amazing, pretty remarkable. And as I suggested earlier, having Gemini be able to look over your shoulder, so to speak, and share screenshots if that's what you prefer, it's really remarkable. And just having full-blown code that works just by using nothing more than natural language and some copy pasting is pretty incredible. So I'll leave that.
It's just, could you imagine that 10 years ago as developer, just trying to just solve just a simple solution of, something's just not compiling correctly, what's going on here, and just being able to feed it into the machine and spit out an actual helpful answer. Rather than having to, go in line by line. It's fascinating how far we've come. I guess we can kind of just pivot just a little bit, and we talked about maybe some things to like enter as prompts, but maybe like what are some of the best practices for using Gemini 2.5, and how can you just what are some of the do's and don'ts when you are entering in prompts for the AI? How do you make sure that the ideas that you have in your mind do come out in the best form possible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, this might sound like a bit of a cop-out answer, but like I think I'd start with making sure that you leverage AI, Gemini in this case, with whatever surfaces you currently work with. So what's nice about Gemini is, whether it's, as I mentioned before, IDE integration, command line integration, or even just going to gemini.google.com, or even on your phone, right? Just we all code, we all develop in various environments given the time of day. And, don't try to over-engineer your work habits based on AI. AI should be available to you wherever you work, right? And so, if you find yourself, restructuring the way you work, and if it's not making your life easier, then there are probably some other aspects that might be missing. Like there might be, some Gemini protocols to leverage to actually make your job easier rather than you conforming to the AI, so to speak. So, sometimes that's even, voice to voice, right? Being able to ask questions about your code using voice. Sometimes that's easier for you, right? So making sure you set up the proper integrations there. As I mentioned, you could copy paste error codes, or you can take screenshots, or you can do, live streaming where Gemini is kind of looking at your code, looking at your workspace real time and giving suggestions, right? So there are all kinds of ways that Gemini can interact with your, current workflow without messing things up too much. So just make sure you explore that. Context window is another thing. So, maybe, last year when considering how Gemini or LLMs could be used to help with coding, it was pretty much like a snippet at a time, right? And nowadays you can load an entire code base, right? So most that are using Gemini for coding capabilities are using our Pro models, so 2.5 Pro. That has a massive context window, 2 million tokens, right? So we don't need to be shy about putting an entire code base in there. Some areas that I'm kind of, looking forward to, and to be honest, I don't necessarily have all the context on how companies are leveraging this today, but statefulness is important. So, having your interactions be remembered. So, I would look into some research and development around, Google DeepMind's, memory bank white paper. Looking at that into how we are thinking about creatively and intelligently storing memories, right? Storing data and recalling memories of past conversations in an intelligent and effective way. So I see that as potentially changing things as we're kind of relying on an assistant to help us day to day with our coding exercises. I will give one very tangible tip and trick though, and that is don't forget to migrate your prompts, right? And what do I mean by that? A lot of companies that we support started off with another model for coding help. So that might be, OpenAI, that might be Claude models. And one thing to remember is all models are built differently, right? Their training sets are different. Their instruction prompts are different. How they've been, further tuned to meet specific, goals and objectives. And so, naturally, whatever, well curated system prompt that you have, or other prompts that you have that work well with one model, with one agent, probably won't be optimized for another model that you try out. So if you're new to Gemini, my recommendation is don't just copy paste the prompts that worked and expect an optimized result, right? So there are, tools and more to come within Google Cloud to help with prompt optimization, prompt migration, right? So those are some things you really want to look into to make sure you're getting the absolute highest quality that you deserve with your AI assistant as you're coding. So those are some tips and tricks I recommend.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like you're talking to another person, right? Like you're going from one model who knows everything about you, turning around to talking to another person. You have to tell them the context of what was said to the other person before they even know what's going on, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, very cool. And this is a good segue to the last question. And by the way, everyone, thank you for listening to this conversation. And this is all part of the Zetachain Google Cloud Buildathon that we're having right now on Dora Hacks. I think there's a link on the screen now, and if not, we can put it in the comments. And we encourage everyone to just go in, just have fun with Google Gemini, see what you can build, and everything is going to be useful. And at the end of the day, if it is something that is actually useful in the Web3 space, you're definitely in the running for a prize. And it's not just first place. There's special awards for unique use cases for universal contract of Zetachain. So there's lots of different ways to be able to win. So we just highly encourage everyone to participate. So I guess the last question we kind of had here is where do you see the AI space evolving? Where do you see Google Gemini really getting stronger? And then also on the flip side, where do you see the weaknesses still? Where do you think AI is still going to struggle for the next 5-10 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I might start with that last one. So, AGI is a goal amongst lots of AI research and development teams out there, right? Google DeepMind being one of them. And so, I think where it might take some time to get there is where you can really interact with an agent. I mean, let's use that term now, an AI assistant, whatever you want to call it, without any gaps between, how you're interacting with that agent. So I wouldn't expect an assistant to be able to quickly pivot and transition, when I'm asking about coding or when I'm asking about like help shopping, right? I would expect an assistant to be able to seamlessly make that transition. And so, when you're looking for an assistant that is truly capable in all aspects of helping out an individual or a company, I think it still might take some time to get there. Some areas, though, that I'm really looking forward to and exciting about. I mean, obviously, in coding, I think that coding was sort of a low-hanging fruit in that, like I alluded to earlier, like it's really easy to figure out accuracy with coding. The thing either works or it doesn't, right? And so it's really easy to set up benchmarks. Well, I say easy, but relatively easy to set up benchmarks to adhere to those goals. So I expect to see improvements there where it's less so of trial and error, try some code, paste the error code, get a response back, right? But be able to be on the mark earlier than later. I see some developments there. But also, as I suggested, the multimodal aspect, even though that sounds like it doesn't really pertain to coding exercises, think about an agent that can look at your end result. Like, let's say you're making an application, right? And seeing what it looks like in your screen and being able to infer under the hood what could make that UI, that UX better, right? Seeing how you interact with an application and get that real-time assessment and feedback as you're encountering bugs, not just with errors, right, in your code, but actually through the UI. I think that's going to be pretty darn cool. But aside from coding in particular, other modalities, so I think we might be seeing how incredible media generation is these days. So with our VO models, with our Imagine models, that are specific to those areas, those modalities, but seeing that being incorporated even more so, it already is in Gemini, but seeing that being incorporated more so into our Gemini models is going to be really cool. And that multimodality aspect doesn't just help from like an input-output standpoint, but when we're really trying to understand how the world works, it's important to have models that are not just simply trained on text, but they learn physics by watching things, right? Videos, they can understand infographics and things like that. That multimodality will really impact how even just simple language models behave in the future by having a more holistic view of how the world works. So again, just super excited to see what's coming out of just the models that DeepMind's creating, but also the interactions with tooling and grounding and all that is going to be really exciting.
Yeah, the whole model discussion could be its own AMA that we could spend another hour on at least. It's fascinating, just the training side, how feeding these images in is different than the text, and seeing it all come together. It's really, really fascinating to see how it's all coming together finally. And I'm sure there's still going to be a lot of kind of a gray period as it all starts to learn and form, but it'll be a truly interesting time. We can just feed one model a picture and then text and have it all come together. Bryce, I'm going to throw it to you just from the Web3 side. How do you see AI kind of helping? Do you see anything, even from the Google Cloud, how it would assist with Web3?
Yeah, there were some great ideas that came out of our recent ZK AI summit that we held in California, or Sunnyvale, South Bay. And there's a lot of folks coming from academic backgrounds sharing their knowledge from DeepMind to Google to the Web3 space. And I mentioned it briefly earlier, is the zero knowledge, or ZK, and how that's bridging the gap between AI and the Web3 space as well. Just a concept of proof of humanity, as there continue to be AI being utilized, and agents, in a sense, bots. People want to be able to prove their identity. And I think ZK can help with that in many different ways. In addition to like mentioning AI or agents, just building agents for the Web3 space, I think this could help out with many complex tasks and automate those tasks regarding DeFi contracts, DAOs, and just provide a personalized user experience. So I'm curious to see how those things start to develop. I know that there's a lot of talk around MCP and how that can help in the Web3 space as well, or MCP servers, which that whole area interests me a lot. And then just one tip out there really quickly to those who are doing the hackathon. I think make sure you're very clear on what you're trying to do with these models and which models you're using. I know Damien mentioned it very briefly, but I wanted to highlight it again. 2.5 Pro, make sure you're selecting. You go to Gemini.google.com and you select the proper model. 2.5 Pro is probably ideally what you want if you're trying to vibe code. And then there's different platforms. There's AI Studio, there's Firebase. You can get lost in all these different things. Understand the difference between them. They're great for prototyping, developing, hackathons, things of that nature. If you want something more robust, you want to build something very powerful and utilize multiple tools, try Gemini on Vertex AI. And that's just a little quick tidbit, but yeah.
I think that's a great place to leave it. Nice little tip for the Web3 space for the Buildathon. Again, highly encourage everyone to go check it out. And with that, I'd like to thank our guests today. Thank you, Damien. Thank you, Bryce, for being here. It was really enjoyable to learn more about Google Cloud and Gemini and how they're really changing the way we look at even just building new ideas and new projects. It's very, very cool.
Sure thing. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Take care. Have a great day.
Thanks, Hill.